Hello, grade 5. Today is Friday. As Madame Donald would say, youpi, c'est vendredi. Today we are doing another exciting math lesson, this time on decimal tenths and hundredths. So this is an extension of what we've been doing with fractions, showing a different way that we can write fractions using decimals. So just to get into that a little bit first, the fraction 1/10 can be represented in various ways. So here's our regular fraction notation that we've seen before. So 1/10, showing you that it is one part of a whole that is then divided equally into 10 parts. We can do it like that. We can show it on a number line. And if you notice, when we have a fraction number line, it goes only from 0 to 1. And since it's divided into tenths, 10 equal parts, that's where we put 1/10 right there. And then we can also use a circle fraction divided again into tenths with one part shaded. So those are, so far, the different ways we've learned to represent fractions. Now if we take a look at the next slide, now we're seeing a new way that we can represent fractions, which mathematicians have invented, which is called decimal notation. So here we show 1/10 equals 0.1. Now if you look at this and think in terms of place value, this is our ones, which we have a 0 there because this is a number that is less than 1. It is a fraction of 1. So we have our 0, then our decimal point, that dot, and then a 1 in our tenths place. So that would be our ones place, then to the right of the decimal is our tenth place. So 0.1, and that's just said 1/10 is the way you say that. So moving on to a couple new numbers. So write the following as a decimal. We have 2/10. So again, we have a number that's going to be less than 1 because we're talking about parts of a whole. So we can write 0.2, 2/10, 3/10, 0.3, and then finally 9/10, 0.9. So those are the way that we write the tenths. And kind of just what I was saying before, that we put the 0 before the decimal point because it's telling you that the number is less than 1. And think of it, if you want to, in terms of place value, where we have a 0 in our ones place. So it's a number less than 1. All right, so for the next slide, we're talking now about putting the decimal tenths on the number line. And we have 8/10, 5/10, 2/10, and 7/10. And again, if you notice, we're going from 0 to 1. This is divided into 10 equal parts, just like with a fraction. So if we want 0.8, we're going to put that right here. 0.5, so I can count to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You notice that's right in the middle there. 0.2 or 2/10, 1, 2. And finally 7/10, and that would go right before the 8/10. So 0.7 right there. So when you're putting tenths on a number line, you got to make sure your number line is divided into 10 equal parts and just count how many it is. All right. Now, kind of the same principle, but now instead of placing the decimals onto the number line, we have three different places that are marked, and it's asking to write the decimal for each marked point. And again, you notice we go from 0 to 1, so we know we have a fraction that we're going to write as a decimal. And since it's divided into tenths, we can just count. So we can go 1, 2, 3. So that's telling me that's going to be 3/10, and we write that 0.3. Next over, we have 0.4 because 4 comes after 3, so 4/10. And then finally, we go all the way over here. I know that this is tenths, so I know that 10/10 would be the whole, so I know this is going to have to be 9/10. So 0.9. So all you need to do is count, then just make sure you're putting that in that tenths place right after the decimal point. Next slide we have is now to represent the numbers given. So this, we've worked with circle fractions, we've worked with fraction strips. I just want to show you the relationship of how those decimals look when we're representing them visually. So we have 2 tenths. These are both divided into 10 equal parts. So if we have 2 of them, we would just need to shade in 2 of those sections to represent 2 tenths. For B, we have 3 tenths. So 1, 2, 3. So hopefully you're starting to see the relationship between the decimals and the fractions that we've already been covering. All right, so here, 5 tenths. Again, I know that these are already divided for me into tenths. So now I've got 5 tenths. So that means I'm going to shade in 5 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll just do that to show that. Not into the 6 there, so there's 5 tenths. 6 tenths, so I got 5 on each side. So there's 5 shaded in, and 1 more to show 6 tenths. So hopefully starting to get a pretty good idea of how the tenths work. Now we're writing a decimal for each picture. And again, all these are divided into tenths, so I just need to here count the shaded parts, and then that will tell me what my decimal is going to be. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I know that's going to be 8 tenths, which we write as 0.8. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 tenths. In C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 0.5, and we say 5 tenths. And finally, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 0.8. Or 8 tenths. Okay. Now, we just talked about tenths. We're going to move into hundredths. So we have the fraction 1 over 100 can be represented in various ways, just like 1/10 could be. So we have our regular fraction, 100th. Here's our decimal, 0.01. So if you notice, this number is less than 10. So therefore, that tells me that my tenths place is going to be 0. So 0.01. 100th, and if you notice on this, we've got 100 parts with one of them shaded. So just remember, if you're having any decimals where you're talking about hundredths, and if this numerator is going to be less than 10, you're going to always have a 0 in this place right after the decimal point because you don't have any tenths. So if you think of that in a place value kind of way. And this is what we're talking about. 100th is written differently from the 10th. There are 2 digits after the decimal point instead of only 1. And so if we're writing 200ths as a decimal, 0.02, and 300ths, 0.03. So that's just how you would write those two. All right, so now we have some fractions that we're given. Now if you notice, all of these numerators in A, B, C, D, and E are less than 10. So that tells me right away that when I'm writing my decimal, in that 10th place, because I haven't reached my tenths, that it's going to be a 0. So it's going to be 0.09, 900ths. B, 400ths, 0.04. C, 800ths, 0.08. 700ths, 0.07, and E finally 5/100ths, 0.05. So just remember that when you're dealing with hundredths, if the number is less than 10, you're going to have a 0 because you don't have any tenths right after the decimal point. Okay, so now we're talking about still writing decimal hundredths, but now we have numbers that are greater than 10. So we're still using the first two places right after the decimal point. And this is what I mentioned last time. If there are more than 9 hundredths, write the number of hundredths after the decimal point. So if you see 83 hundredths, 0.83. 49 hundredths, 0.49, or 60 hundredths, 0.60. So let's take a look at these examples. Write the following as a decimal. 28 hundredths. It is greater than 10, so we know we're going to use those first two, 0.28. Now we have 4 hundredths. This is where you have to remember that if it's a number less than 10, that place in the tenths place right after the decimal point is going to have a 0 as well. So 0.04, and then 70 hundredths, 0.70. And let's move on to looking at these on a number line. So say the number of hundredths and show the point on the number line. If you notice again, we're going from 0 to 1, but we have it divided into 100 different parts. So 100 parts of a whole. So all I'm going to do is look at my number here. So this is 34 hundredths. And I just need to find where my 34 hundredths would be. So here's my 30 hundredths. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can put A right there. Next I have 87 hundredths. So I find that. So 80 hundredths, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87. So there's my B. C, 6 hundredths. All the way back down closer to 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is C. And finally D, 50 hundredths. So right there in the middle is where I would put D. And remember when you notice that the further you get to the right, the bigger the fraction is, and the closer that is to 1. So it's just something important because we will talk about ordering these in just a couple moments. For this exercise, so writing the decimals that are marked just like we did with tenths, we're just doing the opposite. So it's showing us where these are on the number line. So here it's less than 10 hundredths. It's in the 8, so that's going to be 0.08, and we say that as 8 hundredths. Here we have 30 hundredths, so 0.30, already written there for us. Same thing here when we're talking about 60 hundredths, so 0.60. And here I'm going to count, so here's my 70 hundredths, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, so 0.75, 75 hundredths. Okay, only a couple slides, 3 more slides to go. And this is what I was talking about, and now showing a number line from 0 to 10, but this works for a regular number line when you're going above 1, or for a fraction number line where you're just going from 0 to 1. So what I just want to show you, and what I had mentioned before, if you labeled 5 and 6 on here, so you've got 5 and you've got 6. 6 is to the right of 5 because it's a bigger number. So any number, whether it's a regular number line or a fraction number line that's only going to 1, any number that's further to the right is going to be greater than the number that's to its left. So we could write that as 6 is greater than 5. And it works the same way with whole numbers or with decimals. The further you are to the right, the bigger the number is. So take a look now. When we have two decimals, we have 60 hundredths and 75 hundredths. So if you think of where those would be on the number line, which one would be closer to those 100 hundredths, which is 1, it's going to be 75 hundredths. So that is the bigger number. And it is kind of easy because if you just look that 75 is greater than 60, and we could write that like this: 60 hundredths is less than 75 hundredths. I think for our final examples today is just putting them in order from least to greatest. And if you have this on a number line laid out for you, it's really pretty simple because you're just going to start from left and work your way to the right. You just have to make sure that you are naming them correctly. So the first one, I have 1, 2, 3, so 3 hundredths. So I'm going to write it down here. So 0.03. Moving my way along to the right. And I'm going to use my less than, because as we go to the right, we're getting bigger. So here I've got 30 hundredths, 31, 32, 33, 34. So 0.34. Continue moving to the right to get to a bigger decimal, 0.50, 50 hundredths. And then finally, I've got 81 hundredths, so 0.81. And if I wanted to read this whole statement, I'd say 3 hundredths is less than 34 hundredths, is less than 50 hundredths, is less than 81 hundredths. So hopefully that have a pretty good understanding of how we are comparing, ordering both tenths and hundredths, how we represent that, how we can represent that visually, how we write that as a decimal. If you have any questions, you can send me an email or get someone at home to give me a call. We will be starting to having math Zoom opportunities with myself and Madame Donald, so that'll be something too if you're having trouble with any of these concepts, that we'll be able to help you out in small groups. So hopefully I will see some of you there, and I hope that everyone has a great weekend and everyone's able to get outside and get some exercise and some fresh air. Have a great day.